So I want to talk about today getting ready in a Passover sense, but also for the things that are coming, because things are coming, you guys. I don't think anyone's confused about the writing on the wall right now. Things are coming. And there's so many people talking about different things, trying to, make predictions about all of the things that are going on right now. But what we really should be focused on is making sure that our houses and our hearts and everything is clean and clear and free of sin and idolatry in every possible way right now. Like, time is up on this. You need to be ready. You need to have your garments clean and your fire lit in your heart, okay? I had a dream a couple days ago and it really disturbed me. Like, I've had a couple dreams in the last little bit that have really disturbed me. And the last dream I had was a warning that people, everyone, including myself, we need to be ready. He's coming like a thief in the night. So what was going on with the thief in the night? The thief in the night is a reference to temple service. So in the temple, you have an altar and you have a whole burnt offering on the altar. And that whole burnt offering on the altar burns the whole time, 24 hours a day, okay? So in the two whole burnt offerings that were put on the altar were lambs, okay? Lambs on the altar, one in the morning and one in the evening. That lamb would be wholly consumed and it would be on the altar all day. That was the lamb on the altar all day long, right? Burning, right? Now, as believers in Yeshua, we have an altar ourselves. We have a heart that's an altar, right? And so we have to have that offering of Yeshua, the lamb, the Passover lamb, burning in our hearts all day long, day and night. We can't be lukewarm and let that fire go out, okay? So this dream I had was about the thief in the night and how the thief was coming, right? The thief was coming and people were not ready and people didn't have their garments on, okay? So Yeshua is our garment. Yeshua is our covering. We have him on our altar, the altar of our heart, right? And we have that burnt offering going all the time long, all day long. That is your daily sacrifice. Put this together, guys. That is the daily sacrifice. What's the daily sacrifice? Our heart turned towards Yeshua all day long, okay? There was the old temple shadow picture of the daily sacrifice, and then now there's the post-Yeshua understanding of the daily sacrifice, that he is on the altar of our heart and our hearts are burning that offering all day long, okay? So you don't want to be lukewarm and have that fire dwindle, because if that fire dwindles, then you're going to be asleep on the job as a priest, right? So what the priests would do is you'd have the night shift, right? And in the night, the priest would stoke the fire, because you got to keep that altar stoked and burning so that the whole lamb would be consumed by the morning. And then when the high priest would come in the morning, then they would prepare and do the morning sacrifice of the morning offering of the lamb, okay? So there was daily sacrifices every day. That was the daily sacrifice, okay? Now, if that nighttime priest fell asleep on the job, what the high priest would do is he would come in the morning like a thief in the night, and he would find the priest sleeping, and he would take some coals from the fire and put it on the priest's garments so his garments would catch fire. Now, the other priest would wake up and his garments would be caught on fire, and he would probably run around and try to figure out how to put the fire out. But then eventually he would have to rip and take off his garments, right? And so that he would not have garments. He would lose his garments and be naked, okay? Lose his covering, right? So we definitely want to consider this when we're looking at the thief in the night parable, right? So the thief in the night, Yeshua is talking about how he's going to come when we don't expect him. He's going to return when we don't expect him, and it's going to be like a thief in the night. So we want to make sure that we're tending that altar. We're tending that fire, so that that fire is always growing inside of us, and we're not lukewarm. We're not getting distracted. We're not getting distracted by the things of this world. So I would challenge you today, and I do have this in the Passover book that I wrote, like the spring feast preparation book. I would challenge you to write down areas in your life where you are distracted, where you're being lukewarm, where you're not guarding your eyes and your ears, where you're not fully burning and putting your life on the altar for him. I would consider like writing those things down and think about how in the coming weeks, you can really lean into adjusting those areas, okay? Not in a legalistic way, but just realizing that you're getting lukewarm in certain areas, okay? So for me, I'll go first. For me, it's scrolling on Facebook or Reels and just getting kind of lost in the scroll. And then you all know that if you get lost in the scroll, you come across inappropriate videos, or you come across things that are like, too much skin you probably don't need to see. Like I get a lot of fitness videos because I like to go to the gym and stuff. So a lot of those fitness videos, like you're seeing stuff that you probably shouldn't be really seeing everyone at that angle, if you know what I'm saying. So for me, I'm going to really work on managing my time. I'm going to work on paying off some debts that I've really been wanting to pay off, and being really, really diligent in that. And so take a little inventory of your life and just look at the areas where, and pray about it, where he's really calling you to focus, and make sure those garments are clean. So the church of Sardis, they weren't awake, right? So wake up, church of Sardis, right? That goes back to this understanding of the thief in the night. Let's read Church of Sardis, actually. Church of Sardis, Revelation 3. And to the angel of the church of Sardis write, the words of him who has the 7 spirits of Yehovah and the 7 stars. I know your works, that you have a reputation for being alive, but you are dead. Wake up, strengthen what remains and is about to die. I have not found your works complete in the sight of my God. Remember then what you have received and heard, keep it and repent. If you do not wake up, I will come like a thief, and you do not know which hour I will come against you. Yet you still have a few names in Sardis, people who have not soiled their garments, and they will walk with me in white, for they are worthy. The one who conquers will be clothed in white garments, and I will never blot his name out from the book of life. I will confess his name before my Father and before the angels. He who has ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. So Sardis was sleeping on the job. Sardis was not ready, and then the high priest came, and they didn't have their garments ready, right? Their garments were soiled, right? And so this was the warning that I got in my dream, is that we need to be prepared, and we need to make sure and check ourselves now, right? And during the Passover season, we always are. That's why the feasts are so important to understand the timing of, because during the Passover season, you were naturally checking your house for leaven, because you have to look for the leaven, and you're checking these certain things. So you don't want to be legalistic about it and make it about spring cleaning your house. You want to be looking at the leaven in your life, the leaven where you're not fully submitted to Yehovah, you're not fully walking with Yeshua, you are being rebellious in certain ways. You want to really look for what kind of leaven is hidden in your life that you need to clean up, okay? And that's why I talk about the feasts so much. People often wonder why I do that, because there is a pattern that you go through when you go through the feasts that keeps you on track. It is the pattern that he gave us to have good harvest seasons, right? It's all about the harvest seasons, and he takes us through these seasons, and he gives us these patterns to help us so that we are ready in the correct season, right? So as you get ready and you remove the leaven and you seek and you're ready for his for the Passover, you're getting all that stuff ready, right? First Corinthians 11. I tried. I tried to go from memory. Okay. 1 Corinthians 11. So it starts off with head coverings. Okay. Let's read the whole thing. 1 Corinthians 11 is about the Passover. And I know most people think it's about the communion, but communion is the Passover. Passover is the communion meal. That's what was Yeshua doing during the Passover, right? He was doing the communion that, the Christian church understands as communion. They don't understand as the Passover because they never learn the Passover. They learn other stuff that really has nothing to do with the scriptures, right? They learn about feasts and festivals that are not in the scripture. So, when we read through 1 Corinthians 11, you're going to notice the picture of the Passover, and he's saying to us to look at these pictures and associate them with coming to the Passover meal, which is a communion meal, right? So as Passover is a communion meal that we sit down. And so there's so much confusion in this season because people hear Passover and they think that means sacrificing a lamb, and that means putting blood on your door and actually no, it's the shadow picture that you are remembering and teaching to your children and teaching to your family. You're not doing it as a sacrifice, right? The sacrifice is understanding that Yeshua did this. And that was the shadow picture, and then he fulfilled the shadow picture so that we would know the precise design of Jehovah's kingdom, right? Jehovah gave us these feasts and festivals so that he would precisely be able to show us that he is the one that's done this, that he has put everything together so meticulously and prophesied it so meticulously that we will not question our faith, right? When we hear that the Passover shadow picture, and then we see the Passover shadow picture drawn over thousands of years into the fulfillment of Yeshua being our Passover lamb on the cross, and doing that for us, our faith is strengthened. And I think that's a lot of the reason why the enemy works so hard to take these things away from us and to confuse these things and muddle these things. Because when you understand these prophecies, they very much give you, they strengthen your faith because you see how meticulous all of this is, right? You see that it has to be the hand of God that designed it all, right? Okay, so 1 Corinthians 11. Be imitators of me as I am of Christ. Now I commend you because you remember me in everything and maintain the traditions even as I delivered them to you. But I want you to understand that the head of every man is Christ, and the head of the wife is her husband, and the head of Christ is God. Every man who prays and prophesies with his head uncovered dishonors his head, but every wife who prays and prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head. So since it were the same if her head were shaven. So he's talking about, like, if a woman who is unmarried or a woman who's married is going out and she hasn't checked with her husband and checked with what he wants her to be doing and saying, and so not treating him as her head and kind of going out on her own and doing whatever and not honoring him in what she's doing, right? She's dishonoring him and she's dishonoring herself, right? And that reminds me, like, makes me want to cover my head, actually. So on that note, I did have a hat on, but I took it off. So the covering idea, I've gone through this before. So the covering idea is an actual, it's a reference back to because you'll notice in scripture, there's no command to have your head covered, right? It goes back to the test for the adulterous bride and how, I don't know if I can do this without looking, and how as she comes before the high priest, that she would remove her head covering. And so that's a picture of her removing her husband as the cover over her and approaching the priest with no covering, okay? Because she's going to be tested for adultery. Now this goes right into the dream that I had as well. So let me just do this first. I don't know if I can do this. Kind of just winging it here, guys. So So if she is not making sure that, like, if she's being adulterous and going out against her husband, then when she goes for the test of the adulterous bride, she will have to be uncovered. Her head would be uncovered in order to approach the priest and do that. Okay? So that is where that comes from. So you have to understand there was no commandment there for it, but what Paul was explaining was what was going on with the test for the adulterous bride. So if you just look up the test for the adulterous bride, that should come up. The other thing to think about with that, okay, so the church having proper garments on, right? Not being uncovered, right? The thief in the night, not being uncovered. So if the church has been adulterous and they have not kept Yeshua and honored him as a wife would her husband, then they become uncovered as they go before the high priest to take the test for the adulterous bride. Now, the thing about this is there is a lot of parallels in the things that happen in Zechariah and the things that happen in the end time scripture. There's a lot of talk that mirrors, like wormwood going out in the water and stuff, that mirrors the test for the adulterous bride, right? So keep that in mind. So there's that shadow picture of the husband and wife, right? And just the one-on-one relationship. But then there's the bigger picture of the church and their husband as you know, the Most High, and Yeshua, right? So we are all going to face the test of the adulterous bride. And are we going to have our heads covered? Are we going to be covered when we take that test, or is he going to remove our covering and put us through that test? Okay. So if you look up Zechariah 12, you'll see Zechariah 12 to 14, you'll see some of the verses there about the bitter waters that go out. Now, when the adulterous bride, the woman who's been accused of being adulterous bride, goes into to do the test for the adulterous bride, she's given water to drink with the dust of the tabernacle floor in it. Okay, so there's a lot of symbolism and mirrors in that. Okay, so when Paul is discussing this, he's talking about, do we have our covering on? Are we staying under our covering, or are we being adulterous in any way? So what would adultery look like? Are we going after other gods? Are we, looking at things that we shouldn't be looking at? Being adulterous, going after, having our eyes focused on the things that other gods, symbols that the other gods like, or going after those things versus maintaining ourselves for him alone, right? And so, like, a really simple example of this is, a lot of the pagan witchcraft ceremonies and rituals that they do in this time involve bunnies and fertility rituals and eggs and all that stuff. So if you, as a believer of Yeshua, are looking to those things lustfully, like, oh, I want to do the eggs and the bunnies and I want to do all that stuff because it's so fun, are you being an adulterous bride, right? That's for you to take to him and pray about, because the time is coming where he's going to uncover and test everyone, right? And anyone he suspects of being adulterous, they're going to have to be tested. So why do we have the bitter waters, just like the adulterous bride, in the, what verse is that? Bitter waters. I think it's in Revelation. In the Bible. What did we do before we could just search verses up? Did you actually have to know and remember these verses before you actually had to search them up? So there's bitter water in Exodus 15, right? That's interesting. Numbers 5, that's, okay, so Numbers 5 is where you're going to find the test of the adulterous bride. She's going to drink the bitter water, okay? It's got to be Revelation. Yeah, third of the waters turned bitter. Revelation 8. Let's go there. Let's go to Numbers 5 first. No, I think I've read that with you guys before. Let's go to Revelation 8. If you want to go through that test and the shadow picture of the test, go to Numbers 5. We won't go through that today. Okay. Revelation 8. When the Lamb opened the seventh seal, and there was silence in heaven for about half an hour, and then the seven angels who stood before Jehovah, and the seven trumpets were given to him. And another angel stood at the altar of the golden censer. He was given much incense to offer with the prayers of the saints on the golden altar before the throne. And the smoke of the incense and the prayer of the saints rose before Jehovah from the hand of the angel. And then the angel took the censer filled with fire from the altar and threw it onto the earth. And there were pels? No, never noticed that before. Peals of thunder, rumblings, and flashes of light, and an earthquake. And now the seven angels who had the seven trumpets prepared to blow them. And the first angel blew his trumpet, and followed with hail and fire mixed with blood, and these were thrown upon the earth. And the third of the earth was burned up, and all the trees were burned up, and the green grass was burnt up. And the second angel blew his trumpet, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea, and the sea became blood. A third of the living creatures in the sea died, and the third of the ships were destroyed. The third angel blew his trumpet, and a great star fell from heaven, blazing like a torch, and fell on a third of the rivers and on springs of water. The name of the star is Wormwood. A third of the waters became wormwood, which is like it's a very bitter tasting herb. And many people died from the water because it had been made bitter. So the adulterous bride drinks the bitter water, right? And then in Revelation 8, there's a picture of bitter water. Let's go to Zechariah 14, I think it is. I read this yesterday. Maybe it's Zechariah 12. Zechariah 13. Let's go there. I can't remember where that spot is. Does anybody know where the bitter water spot is in Zechariah? These are the living waters, so it has to be earlier than this. $13.9. How did I miss that? 13:9. No, that's not it. Anyways, I don't know where it is. I don't remember. So there's the bitter water picture in Revelation as well. Let's go back to 1 Corinthians 11. So we talked about the head coverings. So in that, when you are coming before Jehovah, you want to make sure that you're staying under covering and respecting and not dishonoring him in any way, right? So for the husband, he wants to make sure that he is covered by Yeshua. And for the wife, if she's married, she wants to make sure that she is covered by Yeshua and also covered by her husband, right? And it's a picture of not dishonoring Yeshua and not dishonoring God by when you come before him to speak about his word, right? let's go on to, then he just talks about, it goes into it deeper and talks about if a woman has long hair, it is given to her as a covering. Long hair is a symbol of wisdom. It's a symbol of, like, you know how Samson had really long hair, right? It's a symbol of wisdom, and it's a symbol of that sort of stuff as well. If anyone is inclined to be contentious, we have no such practice, nor do the churches of God. That is a really interesting verse, because I've really found on being online that there's a lot of contentious stuff going on back and forth, and like debating and arguing, but like being contentious for the sake of being contentious. And some people say, well, it's iron sharpening iron, but sometimes it's just being contentious and like being negative for the sake of being negative. And I was thinking about this the other day, because I actually had to block some people because they were just constantly contentious and constantly like arguing and debating and that kind of stuff. So I would also suggest, like, think about that as well. Like, if you're inclined to always be contentious, that might be something to think about and pray about, because we're all on this journey together, right? We're all walking through this journey together, and there's no need to be constantly nitpicking other people or constantly. What I find on videos and stuff is people are constantly there's certain people that are trying to constantly find one or two things to pick apart. Like, oh, you didn't say it this way, you should have said it this way. Oh, you should say it perfectly this way, and you didn't do it this way. And you know what? Like, you can't win, right? When you're doing, like, the person who's trying their best is not always going to say the correct thing exactly the way that you want it. So have grace in your comments, and just think about, like, if you had to go to your job every day, say you go to your job and you work at a place every day, and every like 5 minutes somebody was coming up to you and be like, oh, I don't like how you did that. Oh, I don't like how you did that. Oh, I don't agree with how you do that. I don't agree with how you say that. And every 5 minutes somebody was doing that to you. Would you feel empowered, and would you feel good about your job, right? It's really tiring. So just consider that when you're commenting, and when you're you're not always going to agree with how somebody phrases something. You're not always going to agree with their personality. It's okay, right? Don't seek to be contentious all the time. 1 Corinthians 11:17. But in the following instructions, I do not commend you, because when you come together, it is not for the better or for the worse. For in the first place, when you come together as a church, I hear that there are divisions among you, and I believe it in part, for there must be factions among you, in order that there are those who are genuine among you may be recognized. Paul, you always say something in such... Paul always, like... It's always like tongue twisters trying to sort out what Paul's trying to say. When you come together, it is not the Lord's Supper that you eat. Okay, so what is he saying about the Lord's Supper? The Lord's Supper was the night that they had communion over the Passover, right? They were communing together, right? They were breaking bread and communing with the Lord together, with Yeshua together, right? For in eating, each one goes ahead with his own meal. One goes hungry and another gets drunk. What, do you not have homes to eat and drink in? Or do you despise the church of God and humiliate those who have nothing? What shall I say to you? Shall I commend you in this? No, I will not. For I received from the Lord what I also delivered to you, and that the Lord Yeshua HaMashiach, on the night when he was betrayed, he took bread and he gave thanks and he broke it. And he said, "This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me." And in the same way, he took the cup after supper, saying, "This is the cup of the new covenant in my blood. Do this, and as often as you drink of it, in remembrance of me. For as long as you eat of this bread and drink of this cup, you proclaim Yeshua's death until he comes." Okay, this is really important, because this was the meal that he was doing, the Passover meal that he was doing, right? He was taking the bread, he was taking the cup. This is what, Christian churches do as communion. This was his Passover remembrance, okay? So why are we doing the Passover? Why do we talk about the Passover every year? so that we can proclaim his death and his resurrection and all the things that he did until he comes, right? That is why we're doing it. So I pray that you won't get legalistic and strange about it. Some people get really, when they discover that the Passover was the same thing in Exodus, the same thing that they did in the land, they get really excited about it and they kind of go overboard. Remember that it is that picture of communion and this picture of our covenant communion meal with him. So when we should go through this. So when in Hebrew culture, when a man was going to propose to a woman, right? So as Yeshua is proposing to his church, right? That's what this is. The Passover meal is Yeshua proposing to his church. He would go to his father's house, the woman's father's house, right? And he would go in to the house. He would knock. The father would answer. The father would invite him in, and they would have a meal together. And they would sit down, and they would break bread and wine, right? And drink wine. And breaking bread and drinking wine is a symbol of a covenant being confirmed. That was what was used to confirm that you were proposing a covenant, right? If you go into Genesis, when he meets with Melchizedek, and when Abraham meets with Melchizedek, you'll see this picture again. So that is in Genesis 14. Genesis 14, verse 17. Let's go there. Okay. After his return from the defeat of Chedorlaomer, I don't know how to say that, and the kings who were with him, the king of Sodom went to meet him in the valley of Shavah, that is the king's valley. And Melchizedek, the king of Salem used to be the name of Jerusalem. So before Jerusalem became Jerusalem, it was called Salem. Okay, so Melchizedek, the king of Salem, king of Jerusalem, brought out bread and wine. He was a priest of the Most High God, and he blessed them and said, "Blessed be Abram by God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand." And Abram gave him 1/10 of everything, and the king of Sodom said to Abram, "Give me the persons, but take the goods for yourself." But Abram said to the king of Sodom, "I have lifted my hand to Jehovah, God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, and I would not take a thread or a sandal strap of anything that is yours, lest you shall say, I have made Abram rich. I will take nothing but what the young men have eaten, and my share, and the share of the men who went with me." Okay, so they have the bread, wine, covenant confirming meal, the king of Melchizedek. That's a really interesting picture of what Yeshua did for us, right? And the Passover meal with Yeshua. So remember this as you're doing your Passover remembrance, that this is the heart of the matter, right? It's a covenant confirming meal that you are engaged to Yeshua, that you have been betrothed to him, okay? That's why Paul starts this all off with talking about head coverings. He's explaining to the people that you are to be a wife to Yeshua, you are to be loyal, and you're not to be an adulterous bride, okay? So he goes through the head coverings first, and then he goes into talking about how they're not acting right? And that they're misbehaving and they're doing all this stuff, right? So that's why he does that in that order, because he's laying it out for you. You're a bride, act right. Make sure you're covered by your husband. Don't be adulterous. Think of it like this. If you were married, say I was married to somebody, and I was going out and acting a mess all the time, that would be a reflection of my husband, right? So when you go out and you act a mess and you worship other gods and you're doing your horoscopes and you're pulling tarot cards, not that you guys are doing that, and you are doing these things, you are being a representation of Yeshua. So if you are acting a mess while being a representation of Yeshua, you're bringing dishonor upon your head, right? You're bringing dishonor upon Yeshua, right? So why do so many people have such a poor picture of who Yeshua is? Because his church, his wife, the one that he was betrothed to, has brought him dishonor, right? They haven't been acting right, right? So that's why we really want to check ourselves when we are coming into covenant with him, right? We want to learn to act appropriate and learn to not be adulterous brides, right? So for as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim Yeshua's death until he comes. So why are we practicing the Passover? Why are we remembering the Passover? To proclaim Yeshua's death until he comes, like he asked us to do, right? That is why we're doing it. We are not doing it as any sort of mystical, mark your door, get it on the correct day, and if you don't get on the correct day, you're in trouble type of thing. You're doing it to proclaim, especially to proclaim to Brother Judah that Yeshua is the Passover lamb, right? That's why you're doing it. You're not doing it for any sort of mystical purposes, okay? So people really get kind of, they get excited about the Old Testament, they start to learn all these things, and then they kind of get lost in the sauce a bit on this. We have to remember it's about Yeshua, because none of our works are filthy rags. All that we do is filthy rags. You cannot do a Passover feast to perfection enough to save you. It will not save you, right? But what you can do is proclaim Yeshua's death until he comes, and his resurrection until he comes, right? That's what you can do. Because your work, anything you do, you can mark your door perfectly, but it's still not enough, right? 1 Corinthians 11:27. Whoever therefore eats the bread and drinks of the cup of the Lord in an unworthy manner will be guilty concerning the body and the blood of the Lord. So if you are partaking of the communion with the Lord and the Passover with the Lord, and you're doing this, but you're coming about it in a haphazard manner, and you're not checking yourself, right? You're not seeing where you need to remove the leaven first. That's why we make sure all the leaven is out of our house on the night before Passover, right? Before Passover starts, you want to make sure the leaven's out of your house. You want to make sure your house is clean, that you've checked the nooks and crannies, that you've gotten rid of stuff that you need to get rid of, right? You want to do all of that before you have the communion meal, because you don't want to eat and drink of the communion meal and proclaim Yeshua in an unworthy manner, right? Let a person examine himself first. Let a person examine himself then, and so eat the bread and drink of the cup. If anyone who eats and drinks without discerning the body eats and drinks judgment upon himself. So if you partake of communion with Yeshua and you say, Yeshua is my betrothed, I am going to be in covenant with Yeshua, and you have this communion meal and you say this, and you're coming into that covenant, but you're not checking yourself, you're not checking your heart, you're not cleaning out where you need to clean out, you're in rebellion, you're continually sinning, but you're doing it with a rebellious heart. It's not. So people, there's two different ways for that sin happens. Sin happens with pure rebellion, like you think everything goes and you just go for it. That's where sin happens. The other part is sin happens when you're still you don't know how to do certain things, or you're really unhealed and you're using a lot of coping mechanisms. Then sin can show up through coping mechanisms. So then in that case, you need to look at the healing. So you need to discern if you have a sin in your life that you are having trouble overcoming. You need to discern whether it's healing that you need first, or if you're just purely walking in rebellion and being belligerent. So you want to kind of take some time and maybe think about which one it is. If you're here having this conversation with me, I would think that it's probably not rebellion. It's probably, if you're constantly struggling with certain things, it's probably a deliverance, an overcoming issue. So overcoming sin involves prayer, fasting, but also walking out that deliverance, like walking out. So say if you had a lust problem, you'd want to guard your eyes more, right? If you had, you want to set yourself up to win, right? Like, so if you had an overeating problem, you might want to seek healing and deliverance, and then you might also want to set yourself up by win by learning about healthy meals or whatever. So there's different layers to it. Overcoming certain strongholds sometimes involves dealing with the healing that you need, right? So for anyone who eats and drinks without discerning the body, eats and drinks judgment on himself. This is why many of you are weak and ill, and some have died. This is why many of you are weak and ill, and some have died. You have not checked where this hidden sin is, where this root of sin. And sin isn't necessarily just being rebellious. Like I said, sometimes sin is in your thinking. You are agreeing with the prophecies of the devil. You're agreeing with the prophecies of the enemy instead of agreeing with what Jehovah says. You agree with calling yourself stupid, calling yourself sick all the time. You're agreeing with the plans of the enemy instead of agreeing with the plans of Jehovah. So you have to cleanse your mind as well, right? And you have to, so sinful thinking, sometimes your thinking and your strongholds are like your thinking and the way that you see things, and you're not seeing things correctly, and that's creating a stronghold in you. I see it a lot in people who grew up with parents that were really negative towards them, or parents that were really harsh. And so their internal voice in their head is that internal voice of their harsh parents. So if their parents were like, you're a loser, you're never good enough, all this stuff, right? That's the voice that they hear in their head all the time. You've got to eject that voice and get it out of your head, right? Remove it and put the word of Yah in your head, the promises of him, how he sees you, how he sent his son to die for you. All of those things, you need to get those wired into your head, because your parents were supposed to be a reflection, your caretakers and your parents were supposed to be a reflection of the love of God to you. But they're human, and a lot of them had a lot of damage, and a lot of them failed, right? We all fail. So when they are a poor reflection of the image of Yah on you, you get a bad reflection in your head of who you are as an image bearer of Yah. So you have to take those thoughts captive and fix them as well, okay? And that's a bit of a process, and I just posted a video on YouTube that will walk you through that process as well. But some of that internal dialogue, you're believing the prophecies of your parents, like you're an idiot, you'll never amount to anything, all of that stuff, whatever your hang up is, you're believing the prophecies of your parents rather than believing the prophecies of Jehovah and how he wants to heal you and how he wants to restore you and how he sent his son to die for you, right? And you are valued and you are made in his image. So we have to remove those false prophecies from teachers, from bullying, from whatever we've gone through in our lives, and put in the true prophecies of Jehovah. So that kind of thinking too will bring about weakness and illness as well. Okay? Your body, whatever's going on in your mind will show up in your body eventually. Whatever's going on in your heart will show up in your body eventually. So you got to root those things out. So it's not just about like you're sinning in rebellion and you're just like trying to be naughty, trying to be rebellious. Sometimes you got to root out where your heart needs to be healed, where you don't understand how he sees you, where that needs to be healed, right? So you got to root that out and pray into it and get healing for it and have somebody speak life over you. So what I always say to, like, men don't realize this about women. Well, some of them do realize it and they use it against us. Women are like gardens that are very receptive to whatever you speak over them. So when men come and they speak horrible things over you, it really hurts a lot more often than when a woman does. And it's just because we're naturally that receptive to men. And so when a woman doesn't have a proper covering or a proper husband that really speaks life into her, she can get really super insecure and she can have a lot of issues because we actually need that guarding and that protection. But you can heal people with your words. You can if you're a husband to a wife and she's really insecure, you can heal her with your words over time. She's not going to believe you at first as you speak life into her, but over time, she's going to heal and blossom before you, right? And so, and men also need this, but I find that women need it more. Men have, they still need it. They still need to hear these encouraging words, but I find that women are very, very receptive to them, right? And I think that's why Paul said, wash your wife in the speaking of the word or something like that. So remember that as well. That you can heal other people with your words. And sometimes if you're really in that place where you're really hurt and broken and just feel sad and like you feel like sometimes you just need somebody to tell you that you're good, you're awesome, and and not in a fake way, but like in a real way, that you're going to be okay, right? And so finding people who can do that in your life, finding a church group, and yes, men do need it too. Church group and all of those things that can do that for you, that can speak life into you, is really, really important. Don't isolate yourself away from people who can help you. When we are really hurt and damaged, what happens is we kind of get really small and like rigid, and every little poke and shake and anything that people say, we're very reactive to, and that makes us want to protect ourselves and not go out into society because people can be mean, right? So you got to find safe places where people will speak life into you, right? And people will give you love and kind words and stuff. And so try, all of you that are here listening to this, try to speak life into other people. Even when you're out and you're just talking to somebody or you're passing by somebody, you don't know, like they might just need a little kind word, right? See an old guy in a grocery store, he's probably alone. Why is this old guy out getting groceries? He might be taking care of a sick wife. You don't know. So just speaking life into people wherever you go, you don't know what the effect that could have on somebody, right? Okay, so don't partake of the Passover without checking yourself. Don't partake of communion. Don't partake of that covenant confirming meal. Passover and communion, the Lord's Supper, as the Christians will call it, is a covenant confirming meal. You are confirming that you want to be in the covenant with Jehovah. That's why we remove all the leaven first before we do the covenant. We want to check and make sure that we have checked ourselves as much as we possibly can, right? And so you can go through different, if you have my book, the Spring Feast book, I do go through this, like different areas that you could look at, how you are just checking different areas, looking at how you're thinking about things and stuff, okay? But if we judged ourselves truly, so judge yourself truly, then he won't judge you. That's why we check now and we're prepared in the correct season so that we don't enter his judgment and his tribulation, because tribulation is for squishing out all that stuff and the sin and the rebellion that needs to get out of you, okay? So if you judge yourselves now, going through different tribulations in life will be easier, right? But when we are judged by the Lord, we are disciplined so that we may not be condemned along with the world. So he judges us and he puts us through these tribulations so that we are disciplined, so that we seek him, so that we check ourselves, right? 1 Corinthians 11:33. So then, my brothers, when you come together to eat, wait for one another. If anyone is hungry, let him eat at home, so that when you come together, it will not be for judgment. About the other things, I will give you directions when I come. So he's writing to the church, right? They obviously had a particular problem that he was dealing with. 1 Corinthians 12:1. Oh yeah, that's his spiritual gifts. We won't get into that today. We won't get into spiritual gifts today. So yeah, when you're preparing for the upcoming season, make sure you have your covering on. Make sure you have Yeshua as your covering, and that you're not trying to earn your salvation. We are obedient because we are saved, right? We are obedient, and we we do his commandments because we are saved and we love him and we trust his word, right? He gave us his word and we trust what he says is the truth, right? So we're not trying to earn our salvation. And so we've got to keep the covering on, right? Keep the covering of Yeshua on us, right? And make sure that our garments are clean, that we're not approaching him with soiled garments, that if anything that we need to look at, anything that needs healing, that we're taking that before him. And at least bringing it before him and asking him for help, okay? Asking him for guidance and how to deal with it. Because he understands that you might not know how to deal with the certain things that you're dealing with, right? He understands that you might not know how to solve the issue that you're dealing with and you're in a hard situation. But at least come before him and ask him to show you. Repent and be meek before him so that he will show you the way through. I missed the part whether your shoes are covering. You know what? I'll put this recording up on YouTube tomorrow and you can watch it on YouTube tomorrow. All right. Anything else you want to talk about? Oh, I want to kind of talk about, so I talked about this yesterday, that they might do the Red Heifers this weekend. The Red Heifers might happen this weekend. So just keep that in mind. That's like a pretty big deal. So the reason I came on here today to talk about this is to make sure that people understand, like, get covered, make sure you're covered, because the test for the adulterous bride is coming, right? And the test for the adulterous bride is the tribulation, the trials that are going to come upon the earth. And so if you check yourself now, if you check your house now and make sure there's no idolatry going on, make sure that you're not walking in rebellion, that you're doing your best to just bring everything before him. Do that now, right? You don't want to be trying to do that after tribulation has started, because what happens to Laodicea, okay? Sardis is told to wake up, prepare their garments. That's what I'm telling you now. Wake up, prepare your garments, right? Philadelphia has their garments prepared. They are ready. They're good to go, right? Philadelphia, they were very careful. They're not lukewarm, okay? Laodicea gets spit out. Get spit out of what? From under the covering. They're spit out into the trials and tribulations. Why? Because they were lukewarm. They didn't have that continual sacrifice of the altar burning on their heart, right? That's what I went through in the beginning. If our hearts are an altar, the evening and morning and evening sacrifices were the daily sacrifices. The daily sacrifices right now are our prayers and our continual burning for Jehovah, right? We have an altar in our heart continually burning for him, and Yeshua's on that altar, right? He is our Passover lamb. So the two daily sacrifices that they had in the temple were lambs, and they were continually burning in the temple. That was the daily sacrifice. Now, when the abomination happens, the daily sacrifice will be taken away. What that means, I don't know, but I need to let you know that if you have an altar and Yeshua's on that altar, you need to make sure that fire is continually burning so that your garments, you won't lose your garments, right? That's why you have to wake up and you won't lose your garments, right? So Laodicea, they're lukewarm, not hot enough for a fire. What happens to a fire if you let it die out? Does it get lukewarm? I don't know, just thought. So Laodicea was lukewarm, right? And what happens? They get spit out into the tribulation, spit out under the covering, out from under the covering, right? The feast of Tabernacles is the seventh feast. The seventh church is the church of Laodicea. The Feast of Tabernacles is the picture of the wedding feast, yeah? And it's under a tabernacle, right? So what is happening to Laodicea? They're getting spit out of the tabernacle for being lukewarm, okay? I pray that this is hitting home, okay? So this is not the time to be lukewarm. This is the time to be woke and ready, okay? That is all I have to say about that. unless you guys have questions. I'll post the whole thing on YouTube tomorrow. Or tonight. I might do it tonight. I feel like an urgency after this dream that I had. I feel like an urgency to make sure you guys have your clothes on. Because I think if they sacrifice altars, that we will see things pop off real quick. If there's sacrifices happening in Israel, something's going to happen, right? Oh, that's awesome. You dream of wedding clothes. I didn't say my dream because my dream had some personal stuff in it too, so I'm not going to share it with the internet. But the dream is basically like people are not ready and the thief is coming. So get your garments ready. And then I had it confirmed today. I was randomly listening to a thing, and I had it confirmed today about like a thief in the night, get ready. He's coming like a thief in the night. So get ready. He's coming like a thief in the night. That's all I'm going to tell you. Definitely coming. And you know, there's no way that sacrifices can resume in Israel and there's not going to be big things happening, right? How do we know which church we belong to? Go onto my YouTube and there's a really long video called The 7 Churches, and that will walk you through all the things that you need to kind of be aware of. And then I also have a video called Shadows of Yeshua, and that will walk you through the churches as well on my YouTube. It's kind of a long conversation. I don't know if I have enough. Oh, wow. I woke up last night to someone saying it's time really, really loud. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Like, I was like, today, I'm like, I need to get on here and just at least try to reach people. I don't know. I don't get a lot of viewers on the lives for some reason. Like, I see some people, they get like 700 or something like that. Maybe I'll come on tonight and see. But yeah, the past couple weeks, I've had confirmation after confirmation that people need to be ready and need to get ready. And my heart has really been breaking because I don't know how to reach people that like don't even read their Bibles. Like, how am I going to, like, I have relatives and stuff that I'm like, how do I explain this to them? You know, like, they don't know what it means to have a head covering. They don't know what it means to have a tabernacle. They don't know what any of these symbols mean. I don't know how to explain to them other than he's coming, right? Yeah. It's hard because you can't. I feel like you want to reach everybody, but you can't, right? Yeah, they look at you like you're crazy. Yeah. I pray for your daughters too, Wendy. People are just, you know how that, where he says, like, it'll be like the days of Noah. People will be like, you know, planning weddings and doing all their stuff, like normal stuff. That's how I feel right now. Like, all these people are just normal life and they have no idea what's about to go down. They have no idea of what's going to happen, right? Thank you, Laura. Yeah, I don't know how to reach. And I feel like it's so late. Like, it's so late in the game to reach people and have them really understand the fullness of repentance that they need to be at right now, right? It's hard to reach them when nothing is happening. I mean, yeah, like a lot of my family I've kind of been able to reach over time just with the different things that have gone on. But they still don't understand Yeshua at that level. So I've just been praying that he meets them and he tells them to repent and that he has some kind of encounter with them so that they will fully repent, you know? And you don't know where they're at, but you know, everybody has, you know, there's so few of us that really strive to keep his commandments and all of that. And we fall short of it as well, right? But they don't need a third temple to do anything. They don't need to. That's the thing. And I think that's like a thing that people are really confused about. Like, they can sacrifice this weekend. They don't need a third temple to sacrifice. They need 8 days, I think, to cleanse an altar. And once they have an altar cleansed, then they can sacrifice the red heifer, and then they can start building the temple, then they can reinstate the priesthood. So the red heifer is to reinstate the priesthood. They don't need anything to re-anoint the objects for the temple. They just need oil to do that later on. If they want to start doing sacrifices, they can start that anytime. And so they have a piece of land on Mount Olives where they want to do the red heifer, right? And so as soon as they cleanse that altar, within 8 days, they can have the priesthood cleansed, and then you have your daily sacrifices happening. So that's like 8 days. Oh my gosh, you guys. You guys. 8 days. So if they were to start the red heifer, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So depending on when they did the red heifer, because they want to do it this weekend, if they were to do it this weekend, which is this weekend is the Shabbat of the red heifer. So in Judaism, they have the Shabbats are named weekly names. So if they were to do it this weekend, it takes 8 days. It's an 8-day process to cleanse the priests. If I recall correctly, it's an 8-day process. So it takes them 8 days to fully cleanse the priests, and then the daily sacrifices would resume. The daily sacrifices as in the daily lambs and the daily goats and all of that they would do. So remember I told you that there's a morning lamb that they would do that would be a continual burnt offering, and there's an evening lamb that they would do that is a continual burnt offering. Okay, so if they have 8 days to do it, when they would start the lambs, the continual lamb burnt offerings, the daily sacrifices, that would be right around the eclipse time. So that's really interesting. That's lining up pretty. Yeah, I believe it's 8 days that they do it. It takes 8 days for the red heifer process to complete. And that would put us at approximately the eclipse, depending on when they do it, right? Which is pretty crazy. It's lining up like crazy. And like everybody's coming to me with like dreams, and they're like, I had a dream about that. I'm like, yeah, I know. He's been giving me warning dreams to kind of go out. And like, I had a warning dream last week, and I posted on TikTok a warning dream about people putting themselves in the Vatican's tents. So like I was saying, the tabernacle coverings, you want to be under his tabernacle covering. Yeshua is your tabernacle covering, right? You want to be safely tucked away as Yeshua as your covering, nothing else, okay? Don't go off and make the Vatican your covering by doing Easter and any of that nonsense, okay? That is all not biblical. Nothing about it is biblical, okay? Don't do that. Vatican, you do not want to be under their covering. So my dream that I had, I posted it on my wall, but basically it was a Jezebel spirit. So the Jezebel spirit is attached to it is attached to the Vatican. So Jezebel would bring in all the idolatry into the kingdom. Jezebel was bringing all the idols and stuff. And so what does the Catholic Church do, right? They have all the idolatry, all the idols that they bring in. They have a whole Vatican full of idols, okay? That's the Jezebel church. That's the great harlot church. You do not want to be part of any of that. So my dream was a picture of Jezebel, that church, and it was a picture of them doing Easter early, right? They're doing it before the barley harvest is ready. And it was a picture of people going under tents that were false tents. They were going under coverings that were false coverings. So they were going under these tents. In my dream, they were going under these tents that had pentagrams on them. And they had all these pentagram symbols on the tents, okay? And I was like, I ain't going in there. And so that was my dream. It was very much like people are getting under the wrong covering. And there's nothing you can do about it because people don't know the Bible and you can't explain it to them unless they're submitted to Yah and he will show them. But there's only so much you can say. I don't know. I've been saying it for 3 years now, right? So that was the picture, is that people are going under the wrong covering. And that's what the Vatican does, right? That's why they changed the Sabbath day, because the Sabbath day is a picture of who your authority is, right? If you look into what the Sabbath day means, it's a picture of who your authority is. Who do you believe created heaven and earth? Who do you believe sanctified you? Why are they told to keep the Sabbath? Keep the Sabbath because you understand that I am the Lord who sanctifies you. Why did the Catholic Church change the Sabbath, right? Why did the Catholic Church change the Sabbath? Because they wanted the authority that they sanctify you, that you are sanctified through their rituals and their priesthood and all of that. They removed the covering that people were naturally going under to have Yeshua as their covering and high priest. And that's why Yeshua said, call no man father. And then they moved everything so that they could become your covering, okay? It's a false covering, and it's very tricky and it's very evil. Sabbath is a sign. It is a mark. You need to keep the Sabbath. You need to be submitted to the Most High God and recognize that He is the one that created heaven and earth, okay? He's the one that created heaven and earth. All right, I have to go check on the children, but if you want my Passover planner book, there's a link in my bio. These are all my recordings are up on the discipleship training, and I'm putting this one on YouTube tomorrow. Either tonight or tomorrow, I'll put this recording on YouTube. So if you missed anything that we talked about earlier, it'll be on YouTube at some point in the next day or so, okay? Love you guys. Tell your friends to repent.